Okay, and we are live. Hi. Hi, if you're in the chat, let me know if you could hear me. Hello. Hey, Danielle. Hey, Todd. Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome aboard to the Tabletop Express. Tonight's episode is a Creators Corner episode, which I always love doing these, but I'm very excited about tonight's. Oh, Jeff, thank you so much. Loud and clear. Hopefully not too loud, so sorry. But anyways, uh, I'm very excited to have Gil Hova here today. So I'm going to bring him on in a couple seconds. But yeah, so this is a live Q&A, so feel free to bring anything up in the chat, and we're more than happy to talk with y'all. So we'll bring him up in 3, and 2, and 1. Hey, Gil.
Hello.
Hey, Gil. Welcome.
Thank you.
Gil, this is exciting because first of all, I've known you for a while now.
Yeah.
We met way back when, like 2011, I'm thinking.
That sounds about right.
2011, 12.
Yep.
So you are a fellow New Jerseyan, which is exciting. And you were the first, like, I guess, like, board game person I met outside of my circle of friends and stuff.
Yep.
So very excited to have you here. Hi, Gil.
I'm glad to be here. Hi, everyone.
Hey. So yeah, this is exciting, and so way back when, I remember back in 2011, trying to introduce board games to my friends, and one of my friends at the time said, "Hey, I know a guy who likes board games, and he has a board game collection larger than you do." And I'm like, "What? What?" So, me thinking, okay, well, I guess 30 games is a lot, but I guess not to this guy. And then, lo and behold, Gil, I met you.
Yep.
And, oh yeah, and Danielle's also in chat. She's in Jersey as well, too.
Oh, awesome. I'm in Jersey City.
Yeah. So, it was so exciting. It was so exciting to meet another board gamer. And, man, I feel like you introduced me into a whole world. Like a lot of these videos are about like board game origin stories of the people we're interviewing, but I'm just gonna hijack it for really quickly and say you were a part of my origin story, Gil.
Yeah.
You introduced me to a lot of games. You introduced me to a lot of ways about thinking games, teaching games. So I am incredibly grateful and sorry for fanboying.
It's okay.
Bringing you in, but hi, how are you?
It's that. I mean, after an introduction like that, how can I follow that up?
Sorry. So I see some familiar people in the chat. I see Chris Barrows is here. Hey, Chris. I see Brian Chandler. Hey. And then, and Jeff Moody as well, saying you, me, both.
Jeff. I know Jeff.
Gil introduced me to so many games as well, too. So we start every Creator's Corner with talking about what was your board game origin story. What was the first game that really pulled you in? How did you get here?
So I wanted to be a video game designer like all my life, even as a kid. I wanted to make video games because I played them all the time. And at one point, I figured, hey, if I'm going, this was like late 90s, so this is way before there were any video game or game design courses or anything like that. Like there was no way you could learn game design from a course. Um, so I was like, well, you know what? If I'm going to learn game design, why don't I start with board games? Because it might be easier to learn design that way than from video games. And
Okay.
uh, actually, that turned out to be a good hunch because a lot of schools do, like even video game design schools, will start off with board games just to sort of get people understanding the basic mechanics of game design before moving on to video games. So I had the right idea, and I read that there is this convention nearby. And just to also set the stage, I had a childhood where I did play a bunch of unusual games. So it wasn't just like Scrabble or Monopoly or this or like I had BattleTech. I had a bunch of Steve Jackson games.
Oh,
I had
cool.
Ogre and Illuminati and Car Wars. And as a result, like I always thought games like board games were the things where you got to be mean to other people, which, at the time I didn't like not like it because I didn't know there was any other way.
Yeah.
This idea of games that where you don't have to be a jerk to someone else, that like I didn't even know that was a possibility. So I start reading up. Okay, so let's start with Steve Jackson games. What are they up to? Oh, they got this game called Munchkin, and I go and play Munchkin, and I hate it. I'm just not into it. I understand there are people who like it, and that's cool. That's awesome, but it's just not for me. I hear about this game called Settlers of Catan, and I go to a convention. I play, and at the time I was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. And later on, I would play an online version of it over and over and over again, and that's when I really was like, oh, this is actually really good. But the game that pulled me in, at one point I was sort of looking around and somebody like finds me, like some stranger, like says, "Hey, are you looking for a game?" I'm like, "Sure." They're like, "Hey, sit down and play this game called Puerto Rico. It's really, really good." And I sit down and I'm just blown away. Like the way the complexity gets managed into like such a simple mechanism of I choose this role and everybody gets to do that role, but I get a bonus. That sort of interaction was totally new to me. There was so much in that game was so new to me, and it just blew my mind that a game could do that. And then from there, I went to games like Princes of Florence and Ra and St. Petersburg. So I was pretty heavily on the Euro train. And I started like trying to design games. Uh, I designed a lot of terrible games, like really horrible games.
Okay.
I, I didn't understand. Like, I wanted to make. When I started, I thought that board games were board games, right? I didn't know that there were genres of board game. I didn't know that there was one game different from another. So I wanted to make a bluffing game because if people like bluffing games, I guess I should like bluffing games. I read about this game called Werewolf, and it was the people writing about it were like almost religious about it, that it was such an amazing game. And finally, one day I go to an Origins and I try it, and I've never been so happy to be eliminated from a game. It was so not for me, and that's when I realized there are different kinds of games, and you don't have to like them all.
Yeah.
It's good to have a mind that's as open as possible, but also if you don't like a game, you don't like a game, and you shouldn't force yourself to like something that you're not disposed to like. If that means you only like one genre of game, then you only like one genre of game, and so be it. And I feel like as long as you're honest and truthful about that, and you're not pretending to like other games, and you make it clear to other people like this is what my preference is, then people can work around it. Sure, there may be some game groups where it gets a little awkward. Maybe you occasionally have to play a game that's outside your preference, but it really all depends on like what your preferences are, how much you like your friends, how much you like the game group. If you're with friends, a game you don't like might be more fun than if you were playing it with a bunch of strangers, for example. So there's so much context there. But I started learning, and so I put the bluffing game away, and I realized, okay, I like these kinds of more strategic games, and I started working on those. And still, everything I did sucked until the light bulb started going off, and I started making a bunch of realizations about what game design was really about.
Yeah. And it's so funny you're saying this right now. I feel like you've told me the same thing when I first met you. Like
Oh, totally.
very much like you know, you don't need to like every game. If you like a
Mhm.
game, you like a game. If you don't like a game, you don't like a game. That's you as a person. That's your preference.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I took a lot from that personally.
Awesome.
Um, and yeah, look, even people in the chat saying, Barrow saying that he can't claim Munchkins for him. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and
But yeah, and sometimes that's all you need is like that little step, that like first step to know that there's games for different groups, and maybe it got you a certain distance in. But it's one of those things where it has a place. I mean, obviously, it's Munchkin's been around for what, almost 20 years now,
I
and
feel like longer,
it
right?
still sells.
Around there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably it
yeah.
still sells ridiculously well. People still play it. I mean, it's a good game. I'm not going to fault someone because it's not to their taste. This is something that Eric Lang, game designer, really, really professes. Is he'll like a game designer will be talking about their position, and Eric will like, okay, well, I want you to tell me what's good, what is good game design in Munchkin, and don't tell me nothing because that game's been around forever and it still sells and it still gets played and people still love it. So there is good game design there. What is the good game design? Can you tell me what it is? And I think that's such an important skill as a designer to know what the difference is between a game that needs improvement and a game that's not to your taste. Munchkin is a game that's not to my taste, but I would not suggest improvements to it because that would pull it away from what makes it successful. And I hate to be so mercantile to be like, well, the market decides it, but it's a small enough industry that and aesthetically and artistically, I still feel like that's an important gauge of whether a game sticks around and how to judge a game. Is how long it sticks around, what kind of audience it has. I mean, maybe you can sneer it and say, "Oh, those people don't have any tastes," but I don't know, man. I don't know if that's the right way to look at it.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have preferences on games, but I agree with you that people's preferences on board games are their preferences, and
Mm-hmm.
even if they're like when I talk about board gaming with other people, they might say like, oh, like we play Uno a lot or something. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying throwing an example out there, just because that is their board game, that doesn't make them less or more of a
Mm-hmm.
board gamer per se. They like, you know what I mean? Like,
And Uno also, one nice thing about Uno is
yeah.
it's sort of an on ramp to game design because people will start designing variants like their own custom house rules.
Hmm.
And what a great on ramp that is to game design. It's sort of giving this idea that games are malleable. They're not like this fundamentalist thing that you have to adhere to the rules, but you can change things. You can mess with things. You can tinker here and there. And how does that affect the experience? And why did this work and why did this not work? And I feel like Uno is such a great test lab for that because its rules are so flexible.
I, now I need to pivot. Now I need to
Yeah,
pivot
do it.
because no, I mean like on that. What are some house rules that you've done in some games?
Okay, I'll tell you a house rule I want to try
Okay.
that I haven't tried yet. Do you
Yeah.
know the game Bonanza?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. For those of you who don't know Bonanza, Bonanza is, I always introduce it as one of the best trading games ever designed. Like it is a game where you're going to be trading resources. You're going to be like, I'll be negotiating this for that. It's really fun. It's incredible. And then people see it. Like once I get people to sit down and play it, then I'll pull out the box and they'll realize that it's Bonanza with an H.
Yeah.
Bone is German for bean. It is a game about trading beans. And at that point, I'll say, it's too late. You're stuck here. You agreed to play it. We're playing it. And then they'll play it and they'll realize, holy crap, this is an amazing game. The thing about Bonanza is you're going to have a hand of cards and you are not allowed to reorder them. It's not really a hand as much as it is a queue.
Yeah.
So you always have to plant, so quote unquote, one card, like the rightmost card from your hand. And you don't have a choice. That card has to go in. And you only have a field of two beans. So if you already have two beans in your field and you got to plant a third one, you got to decide one of those to pull out and harvest. And harvesting takes time. You might have to pull out something before it's ready. So how do you
Yeah.
work around that? You trade. And you see if, I've got this bean over here that I can't use. Can I trade it? And hopefully you find someone who will trade it and they will plant it in their field and it'll go to good use. And
I have
that's
to
sort
pull
of
up some
this,
pictures too. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So that's the central thing about Bonanza.
Yeah.
So what happens in Bonanza? It's designed by Uwe Rosenberg. This was a game he made well before Agricola and Caverna and
Yeah.
all of those other games, Feast of Odin. This was an earlier game of his. It is very, very smart. Now you see that number. Oh, go back to that other picture that you had.
Oh, sure. Hang on. I had it right here. Here you go.
Yep. Okay, so you see on those cards, you see there's numbers. Like the green bean has a 14, the stink bean has a 16, and the blue-eyed bean has a 10. Those are the number of those cards in the deck. So that means if you're trading like a stink bean for a blue-eyed bean, it's not going to be an even trade because there is the stink beans are slightly more common than the blue-eyed beans. So the blue-eyed beans have a little more value. So how do you bridge that gap? Do you add another card? Do you just say, well, you need this card, so I'm going to I'm gonna have to have you eat it and that sort of thing. And one thing people often say is, we'll do this for future considerations. So you asked about a variant. Here's the variant. The variant is that everybody has a set of cubes on them in front of them called the future consideration cubes. If you feel like you've traded away too much and you want that player to remember you for the future, you pass them a future considerations cube. You might ask, what do future considerations cubes do? Do they affect scoring? Do they give you a certain power? And the answer is absolutely nothing. Future consideration cubes have no mechanical value. It's sort of like there's a role-playing game called The Quiet Year by Avery Alder, absolutely brilliant game designer. And what she did is it's a role-playing game where on your turn you have full control over the story. When it is not your turn, you may not talk. So it's all or nothing. So when it's someone else's turn, they may take the story in a completely different direction than what you want. What you can do is you can take what's called a contempt token. It looks like a pile of skulls. Take it from the pile and put it in front of them to indicate that you don't like where the story is going. And just like that, contempt tokens are completely worthless. They don't mean anything mechanically. They're just a communication device. And so I wanted to try it with this to be like, well, somebody won the game and they've got this whole pile of remember me cubes in front of them. And it doesn't mean anything, but it would be such an amazing conversation piece. Like, yeah, you're a jerk, And I feel like that would add so much to the experience, to kind of track that, even though it has no mechanical value. So that's one house rule I really wanted to play with.
That's like a little meta on there,
Yeah. It's and I feel like that's an area of board game design that still can be kind of explored a little bit. On Ludology, I called them soft incentives instead of hard incentives. So another example is if you've played the game, I can't remember the name of it. It's the one where you're the cooperative game in the mall where each player is only in charge of one direction.
Is that Magic Maze?
Magic Maze, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So in Magic Maze, you've got one token that represents the party, and each player is in charge of a direction that the party can go. So so if you need to go north, that means the north player has to move it north.
Yeah.
So, but you can't talk. Like you can't actually tell, hey, it's your turn. You got to move north. That would be too easy. There is a communication device, which is you're pulling this up, hopefully, Ryan.
I'm pulling it up right now. Go ahead. Keep talking. Yeah.
So
how's this picture? Is it good?
Yeah, that's good. So you see at the top, there's that incredibly large pawn. So if you want someone to move and they don't realize that they need to move, you take that pawn and you put it right in front of them. And if they don't do anything, you pick it up and you put it in front of them again. Again, no mechanical value, purely a communication device.
Yeah.
And there's so many moments that come out of this mechanism that doesn't have any mechanical value as far as the game scoring is concerned. And that's a really cool direction to take a game. Well, it's not every game. Like if you're doing a hardcore strategy game, this will ruin the vibe. This is another big game design lesson that I've learned. You could have a game with two awesome mechanisms in it, and it's only a kind of good game. It's okay. And then you remove one of the awesome mechanisms, and suddenly it's an awesome game. And like
Mm,
that math doesn't always like work out to a new designer's head. Like, wait a second, if I have two awesome game mechanisms in my game, it should be doubly awesome, and it doesn't work that way in any form of creativity. In screenwriting, they say that like no line is worth a scene, and no line is worth a scene. Sometimes you take out a line and the scene gets better, even though that line on its own seemed awesome and it was great. It really is how the smaller piece serves the larger work in context.
mm.
And that's such an important thing to remember in game design.
Oh man, and um, I have to pivot you again too.
Yeah, please do.
Uh, you did mention ludology. I do want to
Yes,
talk about ludology and your
yes.
time on ludology because I remember listening to ludology, and then all of a sudden you were a guest, and then you were a co-host.
hmm
How'd that
I
go
was.
about?
Jeff called me. Jeff, before anyone knew, around episode 200 or so,
Hmm.
he called. I think before it's more like episode. It would have been around episode 130 because my first episode was 150.
Okay.
So Jeff calls me and he's like, listen, Mike Fitzgerald is leaving the show. I was wondering if you're interested. I'd already helped Jeff with sound for ludology, so he knew that if I were on the show, it would sound a lot better. But he
Okay.
also knew I had a very analytical mind when it comes to games, and I would probably fit in with the kind of show it is. So, after I had to be peeled from the floor, peeled from the ceiling, I mean, because he had asked me, it was such a hard secret to keep. But I got on the show. It was absolutely amazing. It was such an absolute privilege and honor to be on that show. Um, so Jeff was on until episode 250, I think.
Yeah, it was in the 200s. I'm pretty sure because I'm pretty sure it was you in episode 200. It was you, Jeff. Was Emma Larkins in that part at that
I
part as well
think,
too?
yeah,
And
Emma
Scott
was,
Rogers
yeah,
too.
yeah. So, what happened? It was Jeff and me,
Mhm.
and then when Jeff left, I brought Emma on,
Mhm.
I believe. Yes, I brought Emma on, and it was Emma and me. And Emma was everything you could ask for from a co-host, and she and I like matched up so well. And I think I think very highly of her critical thinking skills, of her hosting skills. She was an outstanding co-host, and I was really lucky to have her. I think she really helped flesh out the show in terms of like the perspective she had and the way she looked at games. Unfortunately, she left the show, and just because she wanted to focus more on game design. Like running as you know, doing media, it takes a lot of time and it takes a
Yeah.
lot of work. And she wanted to devote more time to something that wasn't ludology, and I think that's completely fair. So that's when I brought Sen and Erica on the show, because I wanted other perspectives. And Sen is very analytical, and Erica has taught me so much about game design, and I knew that the two of them together, I knew that they work well together because they're already on a show together. They're both active game designers. Soon after she joined Ludology, Erica got a full-time job at Spin Master.
Mm.
So she really threw herself into it. She does amazing work there. A lot of rule book writing, a lot of really hard game design, because the constraints that she has to deal with are not like constraints that most people deal with when they're making a game, because it is game design for a mass market, however you choose to define mass market, because some people have different definitions for it. But if you're making a game that's going to be played by like 5-year-olds, by 7-year-olds, games that they're going to be not enthusiastically bought, like researched and bought, like a lot of games that we get, but a
Mhm.
game that like a family member will get a 5-year-old daughter, and it'll be one of her first experiences with games. You don't want a game with a 50-page rulebook there.
Sure.
So it's a really very specific kind of game design that is not trivial. And Erica really has thrown herself into it. So and she still does ludology, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So And then, of course, Scott Rogers was on the show for a while, also first doing biography of a board game.
Hmm.
Then I wanted to pull him up to a full co-host because I didn't want him to be like Richmond from the IT crowd. I wanted him to be like a full-fledged member, not the guy from the basement that no one ever sees.
Now I imagine you open the
So
door and he
yeah.
turns the corner.
Scott is such a font of information about games, and
Yeah.
people still tell me that his zones of play theory is one of the just most helpful ways to look at the physical components of a game and how they interact. So he was a critical member. He had to leave at one point because he got a full time job that he needed to really focus on. I had to sort of step away when my company started failing and when my mental health started failing,
Mm.
and I couldn't. I didn't actually have the mental resources for a goodbye episode. I just needed to. I needed to stop and
Yeah.
just cut it, which sucked.
Yeah.
The show meant so much to me, and I never got to say a proper goodbye. Um, so that kind of hurt. But which isn't anyone's fault. It's no one's fault. And the show is still going strong without me. And I'm really, really proud of Sen and Erica and what they're continuing to achieve with the show. It's just that its circumstances couldn't let me continue.
Yeah. So I do want to bring it back a little bit to the start of your video game design aspirations into board game design, and your first design, Prolix, for sure.
Yeah, first published
Yeah.
design.
First published design. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
It was a word game. I was, I think the impetus for that game was I was at a convention. I think it was
Yeah.
DexCon.
I think my copy's back there. Go ahead. Keep
Oh,
talking.
don't bother with it.
Don't worry.
No, seriously. Everything I wanted to do with Prolix, I achieved with Wordsy.
Yeah.
I feel like Prolix is very much an inferior game. If you're going to play a word game like that, play Wordsy. It does everything that Prolix does in half the time with half the rules and twice the fun. I'm dead serious. I learned like that was the difference between me as a game designer in I think 2010. Yeah, that's a much better game. And me as a game designer in like I think 2016 is when Wordsy came out. I mean those like 6 years, I learned so much about game design, and I put that all into Wordsy. So I feel like that's the better game. So, but let me back up. Let me talk about the origins of Prolix.
Sure.
So I'm at DexCon and I play this word game. I'm not going to say the name of the word game because it's not like a game from a big publisher.
Okay.
It was a small publisher who made it. I will say it was one of the worst gaming experiences I ever had.
Oh my goodness.
Not because of the people. This is one of those things where the rules were it was just such a poorly thought out game.
Okay.
It was one of those things where somebody said, hey, you know what would be cool? Oh, and you know what would be cool? But I don't know if maybe they play tested with family and friends. I don't know. You might, if you've played the game, you might recognize it from this characteristic, but it's a card game where you spell out a word. This is like years before paperback, by the way. Paperback is a superlative game, and I think hardback I like.
Which I've played the prototype of paperback at your house.
Yeah. That's
way
this
back.
Is not, I'm not talking about paperback. I'm talking about a much older game. So it's a card game with letters on the cards, and you have to make a word with the cards. So the way the letter mix was, you might get something all consonants. They decided to put in a Q with no U afterwards. Oh. So as we were playing, there was someone who was passing out a list of words in the English language with a Q with no following U. You could like play a card play a set of cards that wasn't a word, but there were colors, so you could make a set with colors instead.
Yeah.
Which is like at that point, why are you making a word game? This is like if your players are having problems making words, that's something you fix in the letter mix. That's not something you fix by adding another rule.
Yeah.
But the worst part was there was a Joker card in the mix, and if you If you play it, if you play a word, you don't score it immediately. You have to wait for it to come around back to you. And if your word is still in front of you at the start of your turn, then you score it. And the reason is the way the Joker cards work is someone will play a Joker card and then choose a word and it just goes. It leaves the table. It doesn't score.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the point? What
Yeah.
is the point of like the fun of a word game is coming up with an amazing word. That's the fun part. Game design, you never ever hurt the fun part. You never ever degrade the fun part. Sorry, there's like something in my throat. It's really
Oh, no
weird. Let me
worries.
drink something.
No worries. While you drink something, Barros mentioned that his favorite Scrabble word is cat, QAT.
Cat.
And also, Rachel earlier loves Richmond in the
Oh,
IT
awesome.
crowd. Yeah.
So, all right. So, what was saying?
Don't kill the fun part.
Don't kill the fun part. The Fiero moment. Jane
Mhm.
McGonigal. She didn't like come up with the word Fiero, but she popularized it. That's that moment where you throw your arms up in front of your above your head. You go, yeah, that's awesome.
Mm.
You don't want to dilute that moment. You don't want to contradict that moment. And in a word game, when somebody comes up with an amazing word, that's the moment you want to cherish as a game designer. That's the moment where you want to cheer. And what this game did is it completely nixed that moment. One moment you have, like, you don't even have that moment because you played, and instead of going, yeah, that was awesome, you go, well, I hope this sticks around back to me. And I question, like, what does that card add to the experience other than pulling down a high of the game, which is why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Like, if the problem is words are too high scoring, then change the scoring on it. If the problem is you want interaction in the game, then figure out a way to handle the interaction where the interaction is the Fiero moment and not the playing of words. It's one of those things where you really have to pay attention to how the players are enjoying the game, what they find valuable in the game, and if it's something that you're not expecting, you have to adjust the game or adjust your expectations, one or the other, so that when the game gets published, it is doing exactly what you expect it to. So I'm playing this game. I finished this game. It's one of the worst gaming experiences I had. And I'm like, well, what is this with word games? I tend to not like word games, which is weird. I like games and I like words. Why don't I like word games? So I decided to make a word game that I would like. And the defining feature of Prolix and later Wordsy is that you don't need all the letters on the board in order to come up with a word. You can come up with any word you want, and you score for how many letters are in there. And I think that simple little tweak is such a big, huge change. It's a totally different way of thinking about word games. And I didn't nail it with Prolix. I think I nailed it with Wordsy. I think with Wordsy, it's a really fun, refreshing 20-minute word game where it feels so much different because you're not limited to these cards. You're not limited to these letters. You look at this and now you have to sort of change the direction your mind works in. So that's that I think is one of the games that like I'm really happy that with the result is Wordsy.
Yeah. And I mentioned to you off camera, but I remember going to your house for the first time and
Yep.
seeing your car parked out front with the license plate of Prolix on it,
Yep. Yep.
which like I mean, but that was like your first published game, and that's just that
It's a big moment. Like
yeah
that was the moment where I felt like I realized I could do this,
yeah
and then Battle Merchants came out a few years later, and I think Battle Merchants is pretty good, but I feel like in terms of game design, I don't know what I would do to make it better at this point.
okay
I released a small expansion of Battle Merchants that was through drive-through cards,
yeah
and I think that expansion
I'll pull it up
really helped with the game.
yeah
It really fixed a few things that I didn't think were singing in the game as well. But overall, it's a good game.
it was one of
I
my
could do
earliest
better.
Kickstarter backs. I remember.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's a good game. I think it got me to another level of game design where I realized, oh hey, maybe I can do this, but I still wasn't like there as a game designer yet.
Yeah. And I remember playing this with you. I remember playing the prototype version. I remember when the campaign was going. I remember playing it when I first got my copy, which with you, which is exciting as
Mhm.
well too. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, and then of course I feel like it must have been soon after, or maybe I don't know. Time is wibbly wobbly, right? But for sure, I remember you coming by to my house playing a prototype of the networks.
Yes.
You know, um, and holy moly, I'll pull up the networks right now.
Yeah, so the networks is, I think, when I found the handle.
Yeah,
Like that's the point where I realized that it sort of hung together, and it was midway through the networks, it was midway through that design where I was like, oh, I see what I need to do. Because even during Battle Merchants, to me, a game was a collection of mechanisms. Like game design was setting a collection of mechanisms to a theme. Like that's what I thought game design was back um, in like I don't know uh,
15, 14.
2014, something like that.
Yeah,
Um, but when the networks came out, like by then, to me, a game was creative incentivization. And what a game designer does is create incentive systems that people will be excited to play with and mess around with. And that's a different way of looking at game design. You're not looking at it as a collection of mechanisms set to a theme. You're looking at it as a set of incentives that get people excited. Um, there's there's a few different like resources where people talk about this, but I feel like once I realized that, and once I realized that it was about like, do I want to do this or do I want to do that, and that pull of competing incentives is where the heart of game design is. Where instead of like, this is a mechanism that everybody does, and now this is a mechanism that everybody does, and now this is a mechanism that everybody does, is that's why I wasn't making games as good as I could when I had that mindset. When I had the mindset of, okay, if I do this thing over here, players will want to do this. But if I do this thing over here, players will want to do that. Which do you want to do? You can choose one. And that's when I realized, okay, that's where game design is. That's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets juicy. And then when I realized that I could model the data on the cards to model a form of reality, that's when it really, really started to kick in. Like there's a card of the networks. There's a star you can put on called Always Dies in
yeah. I
Everything.
would say it's always dice and everything. Yeah.
And the thing about a star is when you put a star on a show, a lot of the stars, they will match, not those stars, but other
Oh,
stars.
here's always dice and everything right
Yeah,
there.
unfortunately, it's kind of zoomed out, so it's hard to
Yeah.
see.
Oh my
But
goodness.
oh my
Yeah.
God, that's a
Oh my
prototype
goodness.
too. That's incredible.
Very zoom.
Yeah. So
Hey, there
there
we
it is.
go.
So the way it Always Dies and Everything works, or the way most stars work, is if you match the text on the bottom in terms of the condition, you put the star on the colorful side. If you don't match that condition, you put them on the gray side. And most of those cards, you want to match the condition because the stuff on the right side, on the colorful side, is more valuable than the stuff on the black and white side. But Always Dies in Everything, the thing about that star is, and I think I changed it so that the last season for Always Dies in Anything is everything is a 0. You're pretty much choosing whether to kill him off in season 3 of the show he's on or season 1 of the show, because you actually choose which way to rotate him. So it's up to you to be like, okay, I'm going to kill him off in season 1 or I'm going to kill him off in season 3. And looking at it that way, that was when I was like, yes, okay, this is how a theme, like it's not theme versus mechanism, it's how theme can work in concert with mechanism. And that card really helped me understand that.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying about where the heart of board game design is, like, I remember you specifically telling me that years ago, where the agony of deciding between two options
Mm-hmm.
is are signs of a strong game design.
Yeah, and you
yeah.
have to care. You have to care about
Mm-hmm.
each one. Like you can make a game where this is an interesting choice and that's an interesting choice, but only like mildly interesting. Now, okay, that's kind of good, I guess. But if you're like really invested in it, and now you come to a crossroads, I think that's where the good stuff is. I'm not going to talk too much about High Rise during this episode because High Rise is quite honestly the game that broke me. So I don't want to spend too much time on it.
Sure.
But I think I did really well with that in High Rise um, on a design front in terms of like pretty much every turn you're making a critical decision about where you want to go and what you want to do. And what you choose is most likely to cut off certain options in the future. And it's pretty clear to you which options are probably going to be shut off. So, what do you want to do? How do you want to go about this? Um, and I wish I could talk more about that game, but unfortunately, I just don't have good memories of what happened and how things went down.
Yeah.
And what happened, if people are curious, is that I got to this point where I was feeling so much stress that there were these bulkheads in my head that just sort of shut down. And nowadays, when I think about game design, I just get like this bees in my brain kind of feeling. It's this
Sure.
like I can't actually like think clearly about games of my own. Like it's there's like this wall and I just can't get past that wall.
Yeah.
And at that point, once that happened, like running a game company no longer became tenable, and that's when I started looking for someone to pick up my games. And thankfully, All Play came to the rescue. They picked up my games. Avenel Wing was hugely instrumental in making that deal happen, and I'm very grateful for Chad and Joe at All Play for believing in me, believing in my games, and making sure that they still have a life in the future.
Yeah, I mean that I think that news broke out about 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, a
right?
couple of weeks ago. We've been working on it for
Yeah.
much longer than that,
Yeah.
though.
No,
Uh,
I
and
believe you.
yeah, and
And
I couldn't talk about it, which is incredibly frustrating. But
yeah.
I'm really glad about that. I'm very grateful for them, and now I can like it's a weight off my shoulders because I don't have to think about game design anymore. Like they can make it work. I mean, they're going to need me for a few things, and I'm happy to help them. But that's about that. There is likely going to be one game of mine coming out soon on Kickstarter or whatever crowdfunding platform is going to happen. Obviously, I am not involved in its publication or the crowdfunding at all, like because I can't.
Yeah.
But it was the last card game I designed before my mind just went kablooey. It is a game called Ferret Frenzy.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I
Does
don't think
anyone
it's
know about this? I don't know about
no.
this.
This is the you. I'm giving you a scoop.
This is a scoop?
This is a scoop.
Oh my
You got a
goodness.
scoop.
Time
So
code it 4252. Go ahead.
this is a game that is a push your luck game about being a pet ferret,
Okay.
um, and all the other players are pet ferrets, and you're trying to steal as much stuff as you can from your human.
Okay.
But it's a push your luck game because at some point there's some cards that represent your human seeing it and
Mhm.
like picking you up and putting it back and putting all the stuff you stole back in place so you lose all that stuff. I actually designed it with people who are big ferret enthusiasts, so
Okay.
it's actually a co-design. um, and so they're the ones who are publishing it, not me. And hopefully they'll be releasing it. I don't have any like influence on the
Sure,
game at
sure.
this point.
Yeah.
I was just sort of involved with the design, and once the design got done, like that was it for me. Um, but it's I mean I think a really fun, really lovely push your luck game. And one thing I really like about it is the way it presents ferrets is so different than ferrets are. Ferrets are often portrayed in the media as like these nasty, vicious creatures. And having owned various ferrets for 25 years, I can assure you they're not.
Yeah.
There's this other ferret person. Her name's Lisa. She runs a web comic called Siberian Lizard because she's from Russia. She's from Siberia, actually. She
Mhm.
lives in London now. She's a huge ferret fan, and she has this comic of her watching a nature documentary about black-footed ferrets, which are a completely different kind of animal.
Yeah.
They're from the Americas, whereas pet ferrets are from Europe. So totally different species. And it's talking about how the black-footed ferret is a perfect predator and nature's perfect killers. And then she looks over at her ferrets, and one of them is napping with its butthole in the air, and the other one is has a toilet paper tube stuck on its head.
Of course.
So I mean, that's more like what having a ferret is like. It's
Yeah.
this adorable, ridiculous chaos. And it is they're such fun animals, and they're incredibly infectious. Like, we have one card in the game called Cuddle, where the picture is someone cuddling a ferret and the ferret being really happy. And like, that's an image of a ferret that I really would love to see go out and have more people see, because to me, that's really the experience of what these animals are like. So that is going to be a game that I don't know when it's coming out because I'm not involved with that, but hopefully it'll be coming out soon. And I was really happy with how it came out in the end. Very simple, 15-minute push your luck game. Rules are pretty simple, but it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Ferrets was the very. I told you off camera that I definitely want to bring up ferrets because my first experience with a ferret was actually at your house as well
Excellent,
too.
yeah.
And I think I forget what game we were playing, maybe Ginkopolis or whatever, and all
Hmm.
of a sudden you just like pull up, your ferret like
Hmm.
right, just bring
Yep,
it back to its cage, like
yep,
bring it back
yep,
to her cage,
yep.
uh, and man, like what?
It's fun, we'd be playing games. Someone would feel a boop on their foot, and they
Yeah,
look down and just be the ferret going hello,
yeah.
and they like human affection, they like human attention. They really enjoy human company. So they're really lovely pets. Um,
I didn't.
Also,
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
no,
Go
go
ahead. Go
on.
ahead. Oh, I
Oh,
wanted to bring up weird stories.
that's what I was going to bring up,
Perfect.
because that's another game that I designed fairly. That was the game probably before Ferret Frenzy that I made. Weird Stories is interesting because it's my first RPG that I made.
Yeah,
Um, and
there's weird stories.
I feel like I really did well in this game, except that, like, by the time it came out, was when my brain was sort of melting and I could not market it. Like, I didn't have the emotional juice to market it, which is a shame because it's. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but I think it's an amazing role playing game. So the idea is it's a GM-less one-shot RPG. It's a story game where you're coming up with a story that won't necessarily resolve. So it's going to be a little bit like a David Lynch movie or the TV series Lost or a Murakami story. There's going to be a lot of these weird, mysterious things that happen, and they don't necessarily get explained. It could be horror. It doesn't have to be horror. It could just be strange. But if you want it to be horror, it could do horror really well. If you don't want it to be horror, it could do dreamlike or weird really well. Um, and it's really cool because that's just the kind of story that I really enjoy. And having a game that actually produces that story reliably every time, I think is was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been, when I saw you come out with this design, I immediately had flashbacks of going to your place and playing Fiasco
Yep,
and the Shabahali Roach, which
yep,
are the only two RPGs I really played because they're one-shot RPGs and they were both introduced by you. I
yeah.
haven't played any RPGs since then, and
Oh,
I want to. I just it's I've been sucked in board game world.
no, that's fine. I mean, Board
Yeah,
Game World is a great place to be.
yeah.
But I mean, Fiasco is still one of my favorites. I went to Metatopia and I finally picked up the card game version of Fiasco,
Oh,
and I'm
cool.
eager. I played that online, but um, I don't want to say anything mean or nasty. I just don't think Roll20 is the right platform for a game like that. I think
Mm,
Roll20 really shines with D&D and Pathfinder,
okay.
but when it comes to a card-based game, I don't think that's like the right platform for it. So that's the only platform where Fiasco really is legally.
Okay.
So that's the platform that I played during the pandemic, and I had a lot of fun with that. But I'd really like to play this new version in real life and see how it goes.
I'd love to ask you about that question. during the
What?
pandemic, how like because many of us were like went to board game arena or tabletop simulator. What was like your gaming?
So yeah, what I did at the time, I had a playtest group in New York City that I ran that met
Mm,
twice a week. I felt pretty good about things, and the pandemic hit, and I needed my playtesting fix. So I founded an online playtest group, and it started in a Skype channel, and then it evolved to its own Discord. Um, and then eventually, I gave that one up when my brain started not working right.
yeah,
But for a long time, like that was my playtesting twice a week online during the pandemic. But I mean, it's in a lot of ways we're still in the pandemic. To be
yeah,
clear, COVID hasn't gone away, so I don't want to say that like the pandemic's over. I know that it's a different stage now. Now that a lot of us have shots in arms, go get your new booster. By the way, folks, it really
for
helps.
sure.
Um, but like I still wear my mask, and at my most recent work event, I wore a mask. I was the only one, well, not the only one. I was one of the few people who wore masks, and it turns out there was a bug that went around that's not COVID, but there's still sicknesses that aren't COVID going around, and turns out wearing a mask really helps with those too. So
Yeah,
I didn't get sick from those, at least not yet. Knock on wood.
knock on.
Other
There you
people
go.
have reported that they did get sick, unfortunately, and I hope they get better soon. But I feel like it's changed conventions a lot because there's going to be a lot more people wearing masks, not necessarily because of COVID, but just because there's a lot of people in the same room. And con crud has always been a thing, and this is a nice way to prevent con crud now.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Um, I do want to bring up too. You have talked a lot about game design in general. You've talked about your own game design and ludology. I know you've taught game design too,
Yes, I have at
right?
NYU.
And what was that experience like?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. The students at NYU, I have been impressed by just about every one of them. Um, like it's funny. There's one semester where I did a writing assignment. I was talking with the other faculty, especially with Eric Zimmerman, who is a genius at game design, and he's also a very, very, very good teacher. And Eric suggested, well, let's get another assignment in your class that's not game design. Let's try. They have to. And we decided, let's have them write a BGG like review. They
Hmm.
don't have to post it to BGG. It just has to be in their style. If they want to post it to BGG, they're welcome to. Um, and a lot of them, the writing just wasn't that great. Um, and it's pretty easy, like make fun of them. But I mean, I think of the classmates when I went to school, their writing wasn't that great either. Writing's hard, not
Yeah.
everybody can do it. And I think the thing that most struck me is writing is not like, it helps as a game designer to be able to write, but it is not a deal breaker in any way. If you're not a good writer, that doesn't really hurt you. It doesn't have to hurt you to be a game designer. It might change your approach. It might change the way you design games, but you don't have to be able to write well to be a game designer, generally speaking. So I wasn't crazy about that assignment. It just didn't like I didn't feel like it taught them and prepared them for the game design world. Then I realized sell sheets. um, I had them make sell sheets for any game. It could be one of their games. It could be for a game that they liked. Like, tell me how you would pitch this game. That was an amazing assignment
Mm.
because number one, it forced them to learn about information design. Like, how do you take this glut of information and simplify it onto a piece of paper? Second, it teaches you how to pitch a game, which is a very important skill as a game designer. I mean, because at some point you're going to have to pitch your game, whether you are pitching to publishers or whether you're self-publishing and you're trying to pitch it to prospective, people who buy it, pitch it to distributors, that sort of thing. You have to be able to explain your game quickly and easily, just like that, so that people understand what your game is about and why they should care about it above the thousands of other games that are coming out this year. So, and then third, It teaches them about sell sheets, which at this point in board games are a really accepted way of communicating to publishers what your game is, and reminding them this is what your game is about. Through all that, I said the caveat. This is always my caveat with sell sheets. A bad sell sheet is way, way better than no sell sheet. A mediocre sell sheet is better, marginally better than a bad sell sheet. A good sell sheet is slightly better than a mediocre sell sheet, and a great sell sheet, there's like very little difference between a great sell sheet and a good sell sheet.
Mm.
Like, it's the point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be a point where your sell sheet is good enough. Go back and focus on your game. Don't like make your sell sheet perfect, because that's not where your efforts as a game designer should be. And that's one thing that I really had to focus on in my class. Another thing is communicating the idea to my students that game design is not like, you think of the scope of an assignment, right? You give students an assignment, they come in, they do the assignment, and the assignment's complete. Now you think about game design. You put a game together, you print out the components, you put it together, and then you play test it. You are not done with the game, not even close.
Yeah.
There was I remember this was one of our first like angry rants about games. Somebody tried to do a National Game Design Month, and they said, okay, here's what you do. You come up with a game, you write the rule book, you come up with the components, and you play it once, and congratulations, you've designed the game. And I don't want to sound like a gatekeeper, but that's not game design, That's not where the game design is. Like, you haven't even started with the interesting stuff yet, because the interesting stuff happens 10th playtest, 20th playtest, 30th playtest, 40th play, over and over and over, and iterate and tweak and iterate and tweak and iterate and tweak. And that's where like you'll be making those critical game design decisions, not in your moleskin, not in like the original ideation of the game, but in like it hitting the table over and over and over again in front of a variety of players, in front of the same players who are playing it for the 15th time, but realize they can do something that wouldn't occur to a new player.
Yeah.
All these things that really only come up after multiple play tests. So in terms of an assignment, it doesn't fit. Is how do you grade something that has to be done like 40 times over the better part of a year? So what I did was I explained to students that for their first game assignment, I was not expecting a finished game. I told them I'm looking for a direction. I'm looking for the point of the game, the thought process behind the game to be cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
I want the experience to point towards a potential experience that would be fun. But if the game breaks on the table, that's not a big deal. Like in terms of the rules break, somebody finds an exploitive strategy, fine. That will not hurt your grade, because I'm not expecting you to have been focusing on that. I want you to focus on the basics of the game, and I want you to have play tested it a few times so that this isn't the first play test. So they did do that with one assignment. They do that with a second assignment. Then the third assignment, they choose one of their previous two games and they iterate on it. And now I want a game that I can play from the beginning to the end, and it holds together. It's still not done. It's still not perfect, but it feels like a game.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that was a much better framework for teaching them game design than like throwing them an assignment and having them think that, oh, okay, I did the assignment, I made the game, I designed the game. Giving them the idea that this is just a step along the way.
I like that approach. Like instead of focus on the quality of the gameplay, focus on the quality of the game making. It seems
Yeah,
right.
and not the components, just like the thought process behind the rules. Like if I'm playing it and there's like a clear contradiction and it clearly hasn't been play tested, it'll be like, come on, what are you doing here? Like why do I have like this incentive that clearly is not working? Whereas if I'm playing it and it clearly like it's fun, but like this part doesn't work 3/4 of the game, that's what playtesting. Of course, you're not going to find that all like in the first few playtests. That's what it's for. So I'll be like, okay, I think you should do this instead with the game, but that's not going to hurt your grade.
Yeah. No. Dan Nix. Yeah. It's good. The network seems like a hard find. I know. Well, with the recent, with All Play picking it up,
Yeah,
networks
All Play
will
has
be
picked
back.
it up. They're going to re-release it. I don't know their re-release plans yet.
Yeah.
That's going to be up to them. But you can ask them at PAX Unplugged because they'll be there. Don't ask me because I'm not. I don't know. I just signed away the rights, and
Yeah.
that'll be that.
I do want to talk about your current endeavor though,
My
of
what?
combat, your current endeavors and your
Oh
and your
yes,
passion of
yes,
combat robotics.
yes.
Tell me
Yeah.
more.
Okay.
Tell
All
me
right.
more. What can I pull
Jeez.
up too while you talk?
Go to nhrl.io.
NHRL.io.
That's the league where I work.
Oh my goodness, I see
This is
flames. Hang on, let me.
yes. This is what I do for a living now.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so um, I first got into BattleBots when I was uh, in my mid 20s. This was back in the late '90s. It was on Comedy Central,
Yeah.
and it was fun. It was goofy, that sort of thing. It went back on the air. A lot of people are like, oh, I remember the show from Comedy Central. It's still around, and I'm like, yeah, the reboot has been on longer than the Comedy Central
Oh
at this
really?
point. Yeah, the
Uh.
reboot's been on a while. So yeah, this because of that show, there are a lot of smaller leagues that were popping up, and these are just like volunteer leagues that just do a competition once a year. They're really good. They're a lot of fun, but they're like once a year things because it's a lot like board games. It's hard to make money off of combat robots.
Mm.
Um, so the vibe is very similar. So let me paint a picture for you. There is a company called Datto
Okay.
uh, that is based in Norwalk, Connecticut, and its CEO, a fellow named Austin McCord, had one of his employees, a woman by the name of Leanne Cushing, convince him to go to a combat robotics event. Now, if Leanne's name sounds familiar, she's also a BattleBots captain with the bot Valkyrie. She's since stepped back from captaining, but so she convinced Austin to go to this event. I'm not going to say the event because Austin felt like, well, the fighting the robots was really fun, but he felt like he could organize a smoother event. And um, around that time, also, Austin sold Datto for, when I say gobs of money,
Mm.
think of a number and it's higher than that. Like,
Okay.
just at like an absolutely absurd amount of money that even he couldn't believe. So he sold the company, this like big international company, got sold, and now he's got all this money, and he decides to start this robot league. So he starts this league in Norwalk in 2018, late 2018, and a few BattleBots captains come to it. And then he holds another one, and they keep coming back, and it grows and it grows. And there was like 18 bots when it started. Our event in September had about 215
Oh my
bots.
gosh.
If you want to know, we started the year like we were pretty dead set. We were like, oh, we're not going to do any reg caps. We don't like having registration caps, like capping the amount of attendees, because we want to see if we can get as many people here as possible. And then we realized we are up against the limits of physics. We can't. We have to cap the attendees. So we capped the attendees, and the our most popular weight class, we filled up 160 slots in 2 hours. So in terms of popularity with builders, it is incredibly popular. We get a lot of BattleBots captains joining us. We get a lot of captains a lot of people who don't compete on that show, but who compete with us and who are recognizable through us. Like we're on TikTok and Instagram, and there's one bot that a lot of people have seen just through like viral memes.
Hmm.
If you go to TikTok or Instagram, I don't know how easily you can pull that up on a computer.
We'll find out. What robot would I be looking for? Any.
Okay, start by writing the word positively, but spell it PAWS. So
Okay.
positively, and then the second word is hysterical, but with two S's, like a cat hiss. So positively hysterical. This is a bot, a
Let's see.
three-pound bot by Tom Farkas.
I found this one right here.
Yep, that's our wiki. I'm in charge of the wiki.
Oh, the way. Okay, cool.
If you can find our video,
Let's see.
oh, by the way, if you want to know what I do at the league, click forward again.
Yeah.
And if you scroll down, you see all those stats.
Yeah.
Those get pulled automatically through a system that I implemented. So
Oh,
that's
cool.
one of the things I do is I'm in charge of stats. So
very cool.
So anyway, go backwards and look for a video. The way
I
it
see
moves,
this one. Cat
yeah, the way it
robot
moves
destroys
is
the spawn.
yeah, that's a pretty funny one.
Have you ever seen a cat spanking a swan that's stuck on its head?
Only in a fever dream. Positively Hysterical has a major upgrade.
Oh my goodness.
As you can see,
I mean, the way it
on that
moves is
arm
just
is a
amazing.
new beater
Yeah.
bar.
I never thought that Tom Farkas was
So,
going to go beater bar
one of
supremacy,
our
but he
most-
has.
It's one of our
Just
most
like
popular
in the wild, the cat
robots.
is the natural enemy
There's a
of the
little
swan.
combat robot
that how it
intro. You want to
works?
stop it?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen?
So there's a little bit of an in joke because there's a very like popular weapon type that a lot of new builders use. That gold thing on the end, it's called a beater bar, and it spins normally at a
This
very
right here?
fast rate. That thing up there.
Yeah.
And what Tom did is he just like put it on the end of his bot's arm, but didn't spin it. He just kept it stationary and used it as a hammer, and that was so funny, you know. So that's what I like about this sport is it's so expressive.
Yeah.
Like people make these robots not necessarily to win, but just because they're really fun, you know. And that's a bot that's just really, really fun.
Nice.
So that's a lot of what we do. Is we also have bots that are stone dead killers.
Okay.
But I got into that, and it was one of those things. It was a point in my life where everything I was doing with board games was failing, and I was just hitting wall after wall after wall. Like every deal I made fell apart, every plan I made fell apart. And then I started doing things in robots, and everything I did in robots worked, and it was awesome, and people liked it. And then I got offered a job at NHRL, and like a full-time job with health insurance that I haven't had for like 3 years. Yes, please. So I'm incredibly lucky to have this job with them. It's an incredible league. We just had our World Championships this past Saturday, and it was very memorable. We're going to have another event in mid-December. That's going to be a very interesting event, and if you've never seen us before, this will be an interesting one to start with, because normally our events are they start at 9 a.m. and they end at about anywhere from like 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So they're like all-day things.
Oh man, yeah.
They're long. But what we're doing in December is we're having a much more limited pool of robots, and we're going to be on the air pretty much between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday between the 5th and the 7th of December. And it's just going to be that. And it's going to be like a tournament that's like a World Cup style tournament.
Oh, cool.
And we've got William Osman coming. We've got the Backyard Scientist coming. A bunch of YouTube engineers, like well-known YouTube personalities in the STEM space, are going to be there also. So
that's exciting.
That's going to be a lot of fun. And they're bringing a robot, and they're I've heard their plans. I can't tell you their plans because it's still a secret, but it's going to be hilarious and very memorable.
Okay. And that's in December, you said, right?
December 5th through 7th. I mean, you can see it live, or you can see it on our YouTube channel. And so that's really what I've been doing lately is a lot of that. I'm the community director there. So
drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, I talk with the robot builders. So I talk to a lot of these folks, and I make sure that they're happy and they have everything they need. I also do stats there. I do a lot of production there. I do a lot of internal systems to make sure that like our tournament works, because we use an unusual tournament format, and next year we're also going to use a slightly different format, but it's not like a format that anyone else uses. So I have to write custom software to make it all go. But the fact that I'm helping out make the tournament format, game design, which is pretty cool. So I'm really happy being a part of that. It's challenging, but it's very, very rewarding when I see that the format actually works and the fans are happy with it, the builders are happy with it. I can't really ask for anything more.
No, that's fantastic to hear. Um, I do want to pivot a little bit back to board games just before we
Yep.
end up though. If anyone in the chat has any questions, feel free to drop them. Um, I do want to ask though, Gil. You did mention you're gonna be at PAX Unplugged,
Yes.
playing some board games. What have you been playing? What are you looking forward to playing? Anything
So
that comes to
I
mind?
haven't really been. I haven't really been playing a whole lot of new stuff. I've played a couple of new stuff. I liked Earth a lot. I thought Earth was really cool. I was expecting to like Arc Nova more than I actually did,
Yeah, I hear
but
that.
I think there's a no. I
Yeah,
totally understand. Like, it's
yeah.
one of those things that's like Mombasa was a
Hmm.
similar thing. I played Mombasa. I wasn't blown away by it, but it's one of those things where like I feel like I played games that were of similar weight and heft and feel. And I'm not saying they're derivative. I'm just saying I'm going to use the word generation. That's not exactly correct, but I feel like it's a different generation. And people who haven't played the games that I played, of course, they're going to like Mombasa. Of course, they're going to like Arc Nova. I mean, they're really well designed games. They look really, really good. I'm sure if I played them a couple more times, I'd get really into it. But I enjoyed Earth a lot because the way the tableau is built and the way that you can build up
Hmm.
with the trees, I think is really, really nifty. I haven't played a whole lot of other new games that really stick with me. I really, I've been playing Underwater Cities on Yucata,
Okay.
and I think that's a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite heavier, longer strategy games for a while.
I remember
Um,
years ago you taught me Raw, and
Still
I
a
couldn't
classic.
play Raw in a long time because it's just out of print everywhere. And then I got my own copy finally this year
Woohoo!
from the Game
That's a
Found, and
gorgeous copy. I
oh
mean, that's
man,
such a great addition.
yeah, no,
So you really scored there because I
mm-hmm,
mean, it's that that Tom Vassar rule that if a game is good enough, it's going to go back in print.
yeah,
Um, and I mean that's eventually gonna. There's so many games out there now that it's tricky. There's a lot of good games there that aren't in print anymore. But hopefully the cycle will continue. Enough people will lobby for them, and they'll come
What
back in print.
what would you want back in print? Anything popped in mind?
I mean, I already own them, so
Sure, but
hopefully, knock on wood, I don't lose them.
no, yeah,
I see. I can't really think of anything offhand because um, I don't play as much as I used to,
yeah.
just because work takes up so much of my time. I'm going to a game night on Friday, and I'm looking forward to that. Like that's
Oh,
pretty much
cool.
my like this monthly game night is pretty much my biggest place where I play games these days.
Yeah.
So maybe someday I'll. My place is an absolute mess just because of the pandemic, and
Hmm.
I haven't been able to clean it up yet. Also because the brain isn't working
Sure,
great.
sure. Yeah,
So
yeah.
when the noggin starts working again, I can start cleaning up a little more and feeling better about that. But I'm getting there. Every day's a little bit better.
No, I hear that, and honestly, it's great hearing from you. Just talking to you about board games, just talking to you in general.
Yeah, you
It's
too,
always a good
Ryan.
time.
It's been too long.
For sure, it's been too long. Um, so before I let you go, okay, it's
Yes,
nhrl.io. I dropped that
yes,
in the link. I dropped that link in the chat. And yeah, I mean, the one thing. So I want to bring up something to you.
yep,
I remember, and this is just us years ago. I remember you telling me, Ryan, you're gonna play this game. I'm so excited to teach you how to play this game, and because I know you're gonna love it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm excited. I was very let down when you taught me Galaxy Trucker,
oh,
but I played it a second time at your party, your birthday party over
Overcon
at
Hova.
HovaCon Hova in
Because
Zeppelin Hall.
it's my younger brother's birthday too.
Yes,
9 years apart.
and I played it there, and you know what? You were absolutely right. I did love Galaxy Trucker.
That was me in Orleans. The first time
Yeah,
I played Orleans, I didn't like it.
yeah,
Second time I played, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then I realized, oh, the first time I played it was like 3 in the morning. I'd
yeah.
been up for like 20 straight hours, and I hadn't eaten in like 10 hours.
Yeah.
So of course I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was that's sometimes what happens. Sometimes you have to give a game a second chance. Galaxy Trucker is such an amazing game. You know, it reminds me of one of my favorite Beaches Econ stories. This is like back in like the mid-aughts.
Okay.
I'm teaching DMocker, first edition DMocker
Sure.
to a bunch of folks, and there's a little rule change that I make, and they're very happy with it. There's one guy who's learning it who's absolutely exuberant about it. He's this big guy with dark hair, and he absolutely loves it. He's got a great presence to him. So he totally loves it. He really enjoys it. I really enjoy it. I have a great time playing with them. We finish the game. We say our goodbyes. We get on with our convention. Years later at BGG-Con, that guy finds me. Like, I see him at the bar. I don't recognize him, but I just see someone at the bar. He's talking to someone. Then he sees me and he goes, 1 second. And he walks up to me and he says, hey, I don't know if you remember me. You taught me DMocker at this convention years and years ago. And it's my favorite game now. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your name, though. I remember teaching it to you at convention, but I can't remember your name. It's like, oh, and he turns his name badge over, and it's Rich Summer.
Oh, get out of here.
I met Rich before he was big.
There you go.
It was so funny.
Some love for you, by the way, for the networks, you know?
Executives I'm really happy with what the executives brings to the networks. I feel like once you've played it once or twice, you really should throw the executives in, because it really brings so much game space to explore. And some of the network powers are hilarious. I still love the PBS network that I put in. Like, each network now has its own unique power. It's an asymmetric game. And the PBS style network can once per season hold a telethon where other people can give them money, and they will give those players little tokens that look like tote bags.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's a great way to raise money for that network. So that was there's some real fun stuff like that. Like, normally when you play the networks, you choose an action, like whatever action you feel needs to do. There's a BBC style network that, because it's sort of stuck in government bureaucracy, it has to use a rondelle to choose its actions.
Oh, geez.
So
I still have to play my copy of Executives.
Executives it really adds so much, because you choose a random network, and it really very much changes your direction on how to play. Like, you can't play it the same way you played the last one. You have to change things up. And I think there's some really good stuff. It drove my playtesters crazy, because they had to play it twice a week for like 2 years.
Yeah.
But when it finally came out, like, it really made a difference.
You know what? And I'm glad that, you know, it is going to be back, and you know, and people will have that opportunity again to play the networks for sure.
Yeah.
You know. But Gil, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan.
So those of you that are watching, next week we're going to be back with an episode of Call Aboard, which is our call-in show, where our next week's topic is going to be our PAX Unplugged preview. So we'll be talking about all the games where we talk, playing, want to see. Feel free to call in. It's a live show that anyone can call in anytime, and we just answer the phone or just hang up on you. You know? But Gil, thank you so much. I'm going to cue our theme song. Pretty cool. And until next time, thanks everyone.
Thanks for the good wishes, everyone.